Hello everyone, this is update for June 19, 2023, day 481 of the war and of the date update. Also catch up for June 18. There is not much going on with exception of the visit of US head of Department of State, or basically Minister of Foreign Affairs in sort of more, call it like normal language of the US to China. And I would say that there is some shift is happening in the West, and it's led by the U.S., where, in a way, West is, and as I said, U.S. is making significant moves to sort of de-escalate conflict situation. A, with Russia, B, with China, and even making some concessions. So first, basically Ukraine got no in terms of admission to NATO during the summit in Lithuania. That's, I think, is coming up in July or even or August. I don't remember. In my opinion, this is actually in the interest of Ukraine. The same as situation with the EU. The best would be for Ukraine to remain neutral and keep its territorial integrity. That would be the ideal outcome for Ukraine. But taking Ukraine outside, because Ukraine is one of the smaller forces in this bigger fight between sort of larger forces, which is West, and this new alliance that's formed and still growing and still adding members. By the way, Bangladesh declared that they want to join BRICS, which is effectively, this really means that they want to join alliance of China, Russia, and Iran. That's and some other countries that already joined. But going back to all of this, what I said is that there is very clear change in sort of attitude in the West, where there is desire to immediately de-escalate the whole situation, and doesn't mean that the long-term course has changed, but from a near-term perspective, there is very clear move in the direction of de-escalation. So as I said, Ukraine got firm no for NATO, and then U.S. Minister of Foreign Affairs went to China, and I think the most, and I just want to discuss this visit, and it's very important during these diplomatic visits how people are greeted, who meets them during their arrival, how their facial expressions, and so on. So if we look here, when Anthony Blinken arrived, essentially nobody met him, with the exception of the U.S. ambassador here. This is some high-ranking official in the Chinese Ministry of Foreign Affairs, but it's not even Minister of Foreign Affairs. So basically, nobody essentially. If you compare to the rank of the U.S. head of Minister of Foreign Affairs. There was no prior announcement that he's going to meet with Chinese president. It was decided literally last second. As you can see, look at the facial expression of the U.S. State Secretary. He's definitely, far from happy, far from relaxed, very concerned, very guarded, reserved. And that's sort of best to describe his how he feels. And also, this is extremely not typical for the U.S. culture, where typically, officials, everybody puts a smile, regardless of the situation. Everybody puts a smile. And then you see here, even I would almost want to say that Chinese top-ranking officials managed to squeeze a little bit more smiles from themselves than the U.S. counterpart. This actually leads to the next sort of logical well, not logical, depending, we can debate this, and I'm sure a lot of people will comment in comment section, that the China actually got upper hand from this visit. And in a way, this visit was forced on the US. And I would say it's not about the renaissance of the relationship between China and the US. And this is my opinion. You can say it's wrong, but my opinion is that the military action by China was I wouldn't say imminent, but somewhere on the very short-term horizon. And the reason U.S. Secretary of State went there to actually, I'd say, delay it. Let's put it this way. And that was really the hope, and that we basically were very, very close to the conflict between China and Taiwan and the West, and obviously U.S. And that was the whole purpose of the visit, is to and if you look at the statements, and then why I'm saying that China got upper hand out of this visit is, if you look at the statements, it's essentially U.S. one-sided concessions to China, basically attempts to appease China. If you look what the statement was, the key statements were, U.S. does not support independence of Taiwan, one China, U.S. is not planning to change regime in China, U.S. is not seeking confrontation with China, is not seeking another Cold War. So you can see this is all sort of concessions. And then on the other hand, what China says is essentially nothing. No promises. The biggest sort of what the U.S. State Secretary managed to squeeze out of China, that China said that they will not support on a state level Russian military, and they may be looking after their private companies so that they don't support, basically, essentially nothing. This again tells you everything about this situation, and as I said, that for whatever reason, and I don't have sort of logical explanation why, but there is short-term change in the sort of attitude or in the course of action in the West. At the same time, also want to mention that I think Chinese Prime Minister was in Germany and talking there, and then German counterpart, I think the president of the German president was telling him that it's important to sort of not to support Russia and so on. So basically, the pressure on China was put from two sides, and it was coordinated from European Union, and Germany is the most important economic counterpart for China in Europe, and then from the US. So this is again all coordinated with sort of pressure from basically coordinated message. And then one more point why China got upper hand. U.S. also asked to have direct, communication link between the both military heads of militaries, Chinese and the U.S. and China refused that. Right. So again, just a summary. This is. Definitely was a visit from the weak side, and in a way kind of forced to avoid some kind of imminent conflict between the two countries. Now let's and then one more, and then just to confirm, there is no renaissance. U.S. Members of the U.S. Parliament are pushing local car manufacturers in the U.S., which is I think GM, Ford, whoever owns Chrysler, I don't remember, to actually reduce usage of Chinese components. So as you can see, this is definitely like sort of de-escalation move, and the whole sort of collision is still happening. At the same time, I want to also say that U.S. business leaders are strongly opposed, any, confrontation with China, and who knows, maybe this visit is sort of pressure from the business side in the U.S. to immediately de-escalate with China. This is totally possible, because you saw before there was several leaders, U.S. business leaders that visited China. The last one, I think, was Bill Gates from Microsoft, or the founder, and probably still has significant stake in Microsoft. But in any case, and the visit was sort of looks like they have. He has strong relationship with Chinese president, which actually I'm not surprised, given that, in my opinion, Bill Gates has a very, I'd say, dictatorial leanings. So that's not surprised that they both sort of find common ground and connection between the two. But in any case, it looks like after that visit, that there was influence in the U.S. on the U.S. political system, where basically this whole visit came about, and that's probably part of the reason why U.S. State Secretary was accepted or has met with the Chinese president. So that's all for about this situation. Now let's switch to Ukraine, to the situation on the front line there. So first of all, there were some viewers who making comments that it's unclear when I say renewal of the offensive. So let me explain what's happening. So Ukrainian command, or Ukraine political actually top pressured Ukrainian military top to start this offensive. I think on June 4th, when I reported there was initial attacks. It was sort of unannounced because Ukrainian side wasn't confident in its own sort of capabilities, and for a good reason. In hindsight, we know, and I spoke about this in the past a lot, that Ukrainian army is not ready, and it's not ready for because of the political top, military top, and incompetence if I say one simple word, without going into tons of details. And so and offensive is the most complicated, most sophisticated type of military action, where the failure is more of a norm and success is rare. And so if you're not prepared, the success is getting close to zero. And so for that reason, basically Ukrainian political top pressures, because they put themselves in the situation internally in the country and externally, internationally, that here we're gonna do this offensive, we got the weapons, we're gonna crush Russian forces, and they become basically trapped by their own propaganda. And so they were forced to do something, because otherwise there will be a lot of questions. Okay, so what? As I said, military top, but the military top realizes that the situation is super difficult, as I said before, from a military perspective, from just objectively doing this offensive, and then that Ukrainian army is not really ready, because they did not prepare Ukrainian army and made everything so that it's not capable of being successful at offensive. And so they just wanted to do it sort of kind of like, I'd say, kind of like semi-trial, or try without announcing, kind of quietly, and see if it goes. If it goes well, then they will say, after the fact, okay, here we launched offensive, was successful. If it sort of fails, doesn't go anywhere, they will say, well, we didn't really try. It was just kind of like, some attacks, but it really wasn't offensive. And so this is, or we were just preparing, or something like that. And so this is what's been happening. As we all know, it's not successful. There are some very limited success. That's essentially from perspective of what offensive should accomplish. It's definitely failure. And so there's nothing to show, and it's becoming obvious. The incompetence sort of becomes obvious, and that's where the sort of the king is naked kind of moment that it's coming for Ukrainian political leadership and military leadership, and so they then they try to say, okay, well, we're gonna try it one more time, or it wasn't serious. We're gonna do it seriously in a few days or whatever, in a few weeks or something like that. And so that's why you see this like sort of back and forth, and then again this kind of like undercover again tries. They still don't work, and this is what happened when I think 2 days ago when I said there is sort of renewal or attempt to renew this offensive. It again sort of failed. Without reaching any decisive results, and so we see this kind of like back and forth, and I think this is what's going to be happening, and or it will just completely will be sort of stopped in tracks, and we're really turning into this World War I situation. I don't know, whatever it is, 1916, 1917, where neither side has any ability to move in either direction, right? So Ukrainian troops are not prepared properly to do successful offensive. Russian side had enough time to really dig in deeply, and by that I mean this is a very generic statement. Also means building 3 to 5 lines of defense, having extensive minefields, everything that's sort of needed to be successful. Also knowing where Ukrainian troops are going to be attacking. So in other words, there's no surprise. So everything is stacked at this point against the Ukrainian side, right? And then on top of it, Ukrainian side added its own mistakes by not preparing troops properly. And so you have this, and then on the Russian side, they also cannot really do offensive because they have dwindling number of troops boots on the ground, and the dwindle goes down with every day, very slowly. But it's again turned, as I said before, they heading in the direction of needing to do another mobilization, not immediately, but sometime in the fall probably, that this problem will become more obvious. So this is the whole situation. So in other words, what I'm trying to say, it's not black and white, right? It's a lot of gray in between. It's thousands shades of gray, right? And that's what it is. So if you try to sort of primitivize this situation into black and white, then you're gonna get frustrated because you cannot turn it into black and white. And that's sort of the whole sort of takeaway from all of this. Where it's going to go, I have actually, it's totally unclear at this point, as I said, because it's sort of like a dead end for both sides. And it's obviously war of attrition. In the war of attrition, if things stay the same the way they are, Russia will win eventually. Just because Ukraine has fewer people, fewer human resources to fill the ranks on the battlefield, and Ukraine is not efficient. It's exchanging plus minus 1-to-1 with Russian side, and Russia is at least 4 times larger. I would say at this point probably 4.5 population wise. So again, just from that perspective, it's sort of it's a straightforward sort of where it's all going. And that's a Ukrainian strategic problem that Ukraine faces. there could be other things happening in Russia. As I said, it's heading towards its 1917 moment. Ukraine is also heading that direction. And if Russia gets there first, then that will be an opportunity for Ukraine. But we may not. So again, there's a lot of things may happen. There's a lot of unknowns. So there's no clear sort of path to like single answer, or at least answer that's very high probability, right? Okay, now let's switch to the front line. I'm gonna walk through in a clockwise fashion, as I always do, starting from very north. So the situation along the state border is much quieter. It's definitely not sort of quiet, not perfect, but relative to what it was, it's certainly much quieter. There's no incursions by RDK or this Free Russia Legion into Russian territory. The shelling is definitely on their lower intensity side. Now let's move to the North Luhansk front line. So what's happening here is actually sort of a little bit of changes. Is that looks like Russian military command is becoming more confident that they can handle Ukrainian offensive, or basically fend it off successfully. And so then they're trying to put pressure, and they chose this North Lugansk front line to put pressure on the Ukrainian side to pull more reserves to this area, so that then they cannot be applied on Zaporizhia front line, essentially. That's the whole idea behind this push here. It's not a major offensive, it's not really offensive as it's sort of discussed in the media. Just really strong pressure to keep Ukrainian troops tied up here and bring more reserves that otherwise could have been used on the Zaporizhia front line. That's all it is here. And there's no really any meaningful advances here either by Russian side. Now let's move to the North Donbass front line. So things here are sort of relatively quiet since departure of the Wagner group. Again, this similar situation, just Russian troops trying to put some pressure. They're not really trying to achieve anything meaningful. This is just the move for the sake of the move, basically. Process for the sake of the process to keep Ukrainian troops tied up here. And, Ukrainian side is doing somewhat similar situation south, continuing attacks on the Russian side, which is, again, just tying up Russian troops and really not going anywhere. There's no strategic idea behind this move here, basically. Now let's move to central Donbass front line. Things here also kind of active on the Russian side, as you can see. They renewed attacks around Marinka and Novomykhailivka, and also Avdiivka salient. So again, the same idea. Keep Ukrainian forces tied up here and ideally pull more reserves to this area. That's all it is. There's nothing more behind this. So now let's move to Zaporizhia front line. And so things here are relatively quiet. On the no real advances here on the eastern side, where this Velika Novosilka area. The only some attempts by Ukrainian sides were again from this the most eastern part, and let's actually jump there. This is this front line near Velika Novosilka. I don't even update it because essentially there's no advances, there's no no new moves here. As you can see, and this is I want to highlight it again, why it's essentially a failure. Basically, Ukrainian troops did not even manage to fully take over this screening line, which is the first line, the weakest one, not intended even to be seriously held by the defending troops. So not even that is not fully liberated or penetrated by Ukrainian troops. As you can see, this Russian side is still holding this line, even there are serious dents there. So basically, Ukrainian troops did not even get to the initial main line of defense, which is number 2, and then really the main one is number 3, where the Russian side will hold sort of dual sort of last ditch attempts to hold it as long as possible. This is the main one. So as you can see, again, just want to highlight this, why this is at this point really a failure. So the only sort of what's happening here is this this village where there was some, well, very local tactical successes, nothing major from Ukrainian side. Russian side is fiercely counterattacking. Ukrainian side attempted to continue advances towards this village here, Zherebyanki, and then in this direction, basically towards basically Dolina, but none of those moves were so far successful. So basically there was some local tactical success, but Russian side managed to contain the initial success. So again, no real move here either. That's all for today. Thanks for watching. Till next time. Bye bye.